I'd like to talk a bit more about dealing with your fears. If you've watched my previous video about overcoming phobias, then you know that I in my life have overcome 4 phobias. The first one was the fear of darkness, which I don't even remember overcoming it. I just did. I don't remember what I did specifically. I do remember that when I was a child, we lived in a 2-story house. Well, if you want to include the basement and the attic, then it was 4 stories. But and sometimes I would have to go downstairs to the kitchen, or I'd have to go, and it was late at night, or I'd have to go down in the basement when it was dark, or I'd have to go up in the attic when it was dark, and all of those things terrified me. It wasn't that there were no lights; it was just the basement in particular was spooky. It was old and musty smelling, and the walls were bare cement and I think cedar block and stuff like that, and it was just a spooky basement. And there was a space underneath the basement stairs that was dark and thus spooky. Spooky. And then but going downstairs from the second floor where we slept to the first floor where the kitchen wasn't a long journey. It was just I had a really vivid imagination about monsters at that time, and it really kind of undid me. So if I needed something from downstairs, I tried to get my parents to get it for me, but they caught on that I was scared, and they would say, "If you want it, you're gonna have to go downstairs and get it." Well, if I wanted it, that's what I would do. I would turn on the hall light upstairs, and I would look over the railing into the darkness of the first floor, and I could only really, from that position, I could only really see the sitting room, and the open hallway next to it. And I would go down as far as I could, on one side of the stairs after the landing, because it was a stairway that turned, and there was a beautiful stained glass window at the landing. But once I got to the landing, it would turn back on itself, 180 degrees. And I would literally glue myself to the wall of the stairs, because on the other side it was just, railing, banister. So I would glue myself to the wall and stick myself as much to the wall as I could as I stepped down, and my leading hand, would be moving forward along the wall ahead of me in order to find the light switch as quickly as possible. But you see, the light switch wasn't actually at the bottom of the stairs for downstairs. The light switch at the bottom of the stairs was for the hall light upstairs. So I actually had to get to the bottom of the stairs, and then there was a turnaround, like a little, just like maybe this wide or so, and there was a stairway for a bathroom, just like 3 steps that went down into a bathroom, a sunken bathroom. It was a half bath, and I just had to reach around inside of there and get that light switch and turn it on. And I was scared, I was scared because I thought there might be a monster in the bathroom. So I get that light on. But then I had to get the next light switch in the kitchen. So that was the same thing. I'd get into the bathroom where there was light, so I was safe in the light somehow. And I would reach around into the kitchen and flip on the switch. Now, once I got that done, monsters didn't get me. I was so relieved. And then when it was time to go back upstairs, I'd turn off the kitchen lights. Then I would get on the stairway at the bottom of the stair that I could to reach the light switch, and I would flick off the light switch and run up the stairs as fast as I could. If you'd seen it, you would have laughed. Hopefully, you're laughing just listening to my story. Anyways, so if you are trying to deal with fears, there are essentially 4 tools that you need. And I'll be honest with you, the first tool that I'm going to mention, I did not use for the darkness. I did not use for my fear of heights. And I did not use for my fear of peeing in public places. I only used it for my fear of needles. When I say needles, I mean, syringes. So it's not necessarily required, but it definitely helps. So I would strongly encourage you to regularly practice some kind of meditation. It could be mindfulness, it could be chanting, it could be Zen, it could be transcendental, whatever one works for you best, okay? But practice that to help learn to get control of your mind quickly. Because the more you practice meditation, the faster it works on your mind. The faster it neutralizes the reaction of the amygdala. Okay? So the second thing that you don't necessarily need also is people who will be supportive. And it's very important you find people who are not going to put you down, they're not going to mock you for your failures or anything like that. These people have to be genuinely supportive and patient, very patient, because it can take years. I didn't have those for the darkness necessarily, although my parents kind of pushed me to get over it. I didn't have it for, well, honestly, I didn't really have it very much at all for anything else. I mean, there were times when I was doing something to overcome one of my phobias and there were supportive people with me, but they weren't throughout the journey. They were just there at particular moments. And a lot of times I didn't have anybody supporting me. And that was just me. But if you feel you need support, find people who are not going to ridicule you or try to scare you, which can just set you back, or anything else. Okay? So those are the first two tools. The third tool that I think is pretty important, and this is going to be harder for some of you, especially if you're very emotional, is using logic. And it really, from my understanding of psychology and how powerful emotions are, you're going to have to learn to get control of your emotions in general so that you can more effectively deal with your phobias. But use logic. If you're afraid of the dark, remind yourself there is no such thing as vampires and zombies and werewolves and the gelatinous blob or any of those things are not real. Those are all stories based on imagination and bad things that people have done, but there are no monsters in the world. So you need to try to combine your fight against your emotional state, which I've dealt with in other videos, with logic. By logically saying, you know what? This is not going to happen. I mean, why am I worrying about this? This doesn't make any sense, especially when it comes to phobias that don't have a logical basis. Now, I can understand if you were on top of the roof of your house and you fell off of it and you became afraid of heights because of that, that's a logical basis for the fear. But if you're standing at a window and there's a rail that you can hold onto and the window is made of an inch thick glass that you can't break and yet you're afraid, that isn't logical. So you can use those reasons, those points to help you fight your fear. You have to tell the difference between when there's genuine danger and when there's not. So you have to be able to differentiate in your mind between real and false danger. That's a form of logic that you must use and is critical to your success in getting over your phobias. Because if you're not just afraid of the situation, but you're also afraid of like I was when I would see movies with syringes, I wouldn't watch the syringe parts. Like if somebody was getting an injection or a blood draw or whatever, I wouldn't just close my eyes or turn my head or something and ask somebody to tell me when it was done. If you're afraid of images, video, or just still photos, or worse yet, you're afraid of words, written words or spoken words can trigger you too. You need to take a very step-by-step approach, starting with the least threatening triggers until you're numb to them. They don't trigger you. And then take the next step to the next trigger and the next and the next and the next until you're to the real situation. And all of those things, all those steps are what the fourth tool is. It's practice. When you're doing things that lead you up to the point where if you're actually in the situation, that's practice. So to deal with my fear of syringes, which was the last phobia that I conquered, and I conquered it on behalf of my wife because I needed to donate blood for her. We happened to have the same blood type. It took me many tries, injections and blood draws and fighting it with logic and fighting it with meditation, using the meditation to calm my mind when my mind was freaking out and my blood pressure was going up and I was feeling tingling and I was feeling nausea, I was feeling faint and I wanted to vomit. And just using whatever I could come up with to help counter that psychological reaction. And of course, in the case of the syringes, of course, it helped to warn the phlebotomist or the person drawing the blood or whatever to be very careful, to be gentle, to use a smaller needle, what they call a butterfly needle sometimes, and that I am phobic, or I was. And that's what I did. And I was very fortunate that when I donated my blood for my wife, that the person I got was very careful. I almost didn't feel it. And I'll tell you what, I just kind of distracted myself. I said, talk to me while you're putting the needle in. And so we talked and he put it in. And I didn't really feel it very much. And that was mostly a credit to the progress that I made up to that point. And so, eventually I kind of casually looked at it and looked away and looked at it and looked away. And I finally commented to him, I said, I'm so glad I didn't watch you put it in. Because it was a big frickin' needle. But the point wasn't that. The point was that I had succeeded. And that when he removed the needle, I didn't freak out. I didn't have any of those reactions that I'd had in the past. And yesterday I had blood drawn to do some tests. And I didn't freak out. In fact, I barely felt the needle go in. And it didn't freak me out at all. There was a time when having a needle put in me, I would cry. Truth. I would cry. So, you need to have meditation and supportive friends and logic and then the practice. And then the true litmus test may or may not ever need to be put to it. In my case, donating blood was the ultimate that I could do. And I had to do it for my wife. Well, I suppose I didn't. I suppose I could have waited for some other person to donate blood. Because there were other people that would come forward and donate for my wife. But I would donate blood, and so that was the big thing for me. But if you're afraid of something that is dangerous, I don't mean like skydiving dangerous. I mean like literally for example, you step into a cage with a tiger. That's dangerous, okay? That's not something you have to do. You probably will never need to do that in your life. So if you can practice all the way up to the point where everything's comfortable and you never have to actually face that fear head on, like this far away from you, it's okay. But many of you have fear of spiders. You have fear of weird textures. You have a fear of cats. You have a fear of water. My wife had a fear of water that she overcame while we were married. These are all things that you are going to encounter in life. So all that preparation will prepare you for the day that you will be free of your fears. And even if you don't have a phobia, even if you're just afraid of doing an interview, or you're afraid of taking a test, or you're afraid of getting up on stage, or you're afraid of speaking in front of other people, even if they're friends and family, you're afraid of doing something that isn't to the level of a phobia, but it freaks you out, you can overcome that. I've helped my daughter with that, to overcome her fear of stage fright. And she's done solos in front of an audience of hundreds of people. And you can do it too. For some of you it'll be easier, some of you it'll be harder, but you can do it. The important thing, the most important thing of all, and this isn't really a tool, this is just, you gotta have grit. You can't give up. You have to keep trying until you're done, because you've succeeded. And then you'll be happy, because you have conquered a fear in yourself. You have freed yourself from that burden, from that stress. If you ever have managed to do that, please write in my comments and let me know, so that I can share your joy, so I can be proud of you. Thank you for listening. I hope this helps.